All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar today, our special Thursday edition of Tuesdays with Tim. Today we're going to talk about figuring cost of care. I know that y'all are anxious to learn how to do this and start crunching your own numbers. I kind of asked today during the webinar that we just kind of listen and ask questions and kind of get this down. And then once we get done with the webinar, then you can start crunching your numbers. But if you start trying to crunch your numbers now, you're going to lose focus and you might miss something. You do have two very important handouts that you can download on your control panel there that you see on the right side of your screen. It says materials. You've got a cost of care worksheet that's got the instructions. And then I kind of gave you a sample breakdown that we're going to go over here in class. So if you are able to, download and print those handouts, it's going to be very helpful for you today. If you're not able to print them, if you're remote or you don't have a printer on you right now, that's okay. Don't panic. You can still listen along. And then you can download them later on, or you can shoot me an email and I will send them to you. But they're going to be very helpful for you when figuring your cost of care. I wanted to start the webinar off today. Number one, why do you want to figure your cost of care? There's a lot of different reasons why it's important that you do this. Upon startup, for those of you that are new business owners, new directors that may be coming into your position, this is important. And I also think it's important at least once a year that you kind of figure your cost of care and kind of see where you're doing. One of the big mistakes that we make as operators is that we tend to decide our tuition prices based on other centers in the area. What is the competition charging parents? And then my tuition rates need to be similar to my competition. That's a big mistake that people tend to make. While you want to stay competitive in your market, you don't want to set yourself up for failure. You want to set your tuition rates that are appropriate for your school and your cost of care. So that's, kind of number one on why you want to know cost of care, is because it's going to help you decide how much to charge your parents. If you have all these other centers in your area that are failing, that are going bankrupt, that are going out of business, obviously you don't want your tuition rates to match theirs, because there's a reason why they're going out of business. You've got to take that into account, all right? But it's also really good to look at this and to understand that every single program has different operating costs, and those different operating costs, also will affect your cost of care. For example, the three schools that we own, we're private owners, individuals that own these schools. So our cost of care is going to be totally different than a franchise that's down the road, or a corporate site that you've got down the road. Obviously, we do not have franchise fees. We do not have corporate overhead, those type of things that's going to add to your cost of care. So it's a lot cheaper for us to operate than some places down the street. Okay. Another very, very important reason on why you want to figure cost of care is this is also going to help you determine your marketing efforts, all right? If you find that you've got a particular classroom that you are not making a profit on, or that you are losing money on a particular classroom, obviously you don't want to put marketing dollars into that line of your business. For example, infant care, and infants is actually going to be the example I'm going to show you today. You actually lose money. In most cases, you lose money in your infant programs. Some of you may not realize how much you're losing, but you obviously don't want to sink a lot of marketing dollars into a classroom that you're losing money on. You want to sink your marketing dollars on your profitable classrooms. All right, so that's another, big reason on why you want to do this. A lot of people, when they do their cost of care analysis, they will find that it is better for their business to eliminate certain classrooms. Again, such as your infant room, or in some cases, a young toddler room. If you're losing money in these classrooms, why have it? All right. And I see a lot of, especially nonprofit organizations, that will eliminate these classrooms just because, again, there's no money there and it's actually costing you money. Now, totally separate training, but there's basically 3 reasons why we have infant classrooms. They don't make money, so why have it? Well, you have an infant classroom because, number one, eventually those children will grow up into a profitable child. Number two, a lot of times infants will bring a sibling that is a profitable child. And number 3, a service to the community. Those are the main reasons why we do infant programs. Okay? All right, so let's get to what we came for today and how to figure your cost of care. All right? Now, again, in your worksheet that you're able to print out, you've got some pretty detailed instructions on how to do this. I'm going to walk you through it step by step and show you what to do. Now, again, don't start crunching your numbers just yet. Pay attention right now, and then once we get done with the webinar, then you can start crunching and kind of see what you've got there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over where everyone can see my screen. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see my screen now. And we're kind of going to do a rundown. Now, there's several steps that you can see here to determining your cost of care. Now, first thing, you're going to do this by classroom. Okay. Now, if you really, really, really wanted to get detailed, you could do this by the child and figure that out. If you are in a situation where you have a lot of children that have different tuition rates for different reasons, you may want to spend the time doing this by child. For example, you may be in a situation where you've got private pay children that pay the flat tuition amount. You could have CCMS or subsidized children. And with your subsidized children, they are getting a discounted amount. You definitely need to take that into consideration. You could have children that are getting family discounts, corporate discounts, scholarships, whatever you do in your world. For the sake of simplicity, and for today's webinar, I would encourage you to figure out the average tuition of the classroom, and we'll get to that in just a second. All right? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick a classroom to get started. And let's just go ahead and start at the beginning. I chose to start with an infant classroom. And hopefully, I need to open up my little chat box. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. If you can see my screen, type yes into your chat section there so that I can at least see that a few people can see my screen. Okay, awesome, awesome. There we go. Yay. All right. So we're going to take our infant room, and we're first going to figure out what are our gross wages for the classroom. So you can see here, I've got teacher 1, which is probably my lead teacher. She works 40 hours a week at $12 an hour. Her gross wages are $480. I've got an assistant teacher that's full-time. I just kind of made this stuff up right here, making $10 an hour, so that's $400 a week. And then probably an assistant teacher that works in the afternoon, 25 hours a week at $10 an hour, so $250. So when you add those 3 gross wages up, it comes up to $1,130 a week. Now, for you guys, when you really start doing this, you can go ahead and make the assumption on hours and do a typical week if you want. If you really want to get nitty-gritty, use your payroll journal, figure out the exact gross wages for the week, and you're going to get a more accurate number that way. Okay, so when we figure cost of care, we want to focus on the cost per day. All right. So we're going to take that $1,130 for the week, divide it by 5, and so that infant classroom is costing us $226 per day in gross wages. Okay. And again, you're going to do that for each individual classroom and figure out what your gross wages are for each individual classroom. All right, so that's step 1 right there. Now, step 2 is probably the hardest part of all of this. And step 2 is where we're going to figure out your operating cost. Okay. Now, you might want to take your profit loss statement, your financials, whatever that looks like in your world, but take a month of your operating costs. Now is a perfect time to do this because you've got December. You probably have your books closed out for December, or take an October, November, whatnot. In my example right here, I took October simply because there were no holidays in October. It was a pretty clean month, so I was able to get some average numbers right here. Now, when you look at your operating expenses, make sure that you include everything. And I kind of made a list right here: food and milk, supplies, utilities, contracts, maintenance, vehicles, activities, insurance, lease or mortgage, credit, marketing, taxes. And remember, with taxes, you've got payroll taxes, you've got property taxes, you've got personal content taxes. You need to include all of that. Unemployment taxes, all right, miscellaneous fees, bank fees, payroll expenses, travel, staff expenses. Staff expenses would include cost of training, cost of fingerprinting, CPR and first aid. Include every single penny that you spend into your program. In my example right here, we spent $52,218 in the month of October. Now, you want to make sure you're getting accurate math here. So you're going to take your operating cost for the month, multiply by 12, which in our case is $626,616. Divide that by 52 weeks, and then divide that 52 weeks by 5 days. So you can see here our operating costs are $2,410 a day. Okay. So now again, if you really wanted to get nitty gritty, you could break this one down by classroom, but that's very difficult to do unless you've got a super, super awesome accountant that allocates every penny in the right place. I find it to be a lot easier to just do it center-wide and then divide that by your total number of children. Okay? So there we go. So in this case right here, we decided that our... Oh, I'm sorry. We have somebody talking in the background and it's disruptive to everybody. I need to mute the microphone so that we can all hear. Okay, I went ahead and did that. I muted the microphone so that everyone can hear. If you've got a question, you're going to have to type it into the chat screen now. But there was someone talking and it was interrupting all of us. So there we go. All right, so I took our $2,410 of operating cost per day and divided it by the total number of children that you currently have enrolled. All right. Not what you're licensed for, not what you think you have, but your actual number of children that you have enrolled right now. Okay, so in this case, I just made up 180 kids, so $2,410 divided by 180 kids. So we're spending $13.38 per day on operating costs. Okay, we're going to add that to our payroll expenses, which is the $226 a day is what we were spending in that infant room. We have 8 children in that infant room, so that's $28.25 per infant for payroll. You're going to add your $13.38 in operating costs plus your $28.25 in payroll. So you can see in our example right here that each infant is costing you $41.63 per day in this particular example. Okay, so that's a big magic number right there that you want to hold on to. You want to circle it, put it in red, but that's your cost of care for each child in that infant room, $41.63. Now, here's the fun part, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to take your tuition, and whether you do weekly tuition or monthly tuition, and you're going to figure out how much tuition are you collecting per day for those children, okay? Now, again, this is where you want to look at your flat tuition rates minus any discounts, subsidy discounts, family discounts, corporate discounts. You want to know exactly how much money you're sticking in your pocket or in the bank account for each child. So in this particular example, I came up with an infant tuition rate of $190 per week. Divide that by 5. So we're collecting $38 a day for the infant. Do y'all already see where the problem is coming in? So in this particular example, you're going to take your $38 per day that you're collecting from the parents minus your $41.63 in operating cost or cost of care, and that's going to leave us a negative $3.63. So in this particular situation, I'm actually paying $3.63 per day for each infant that I have in that classroom. Okay, so I'm losing money in this particular classroom. All right. If I multiply that, I can figure out that I'm losing $943.80 per year on each infant that I have in care. All right. And so that's kind of a little breakdown step by step of how to figure that cost of care. All right. Now, again, you're going to notice that as you go through your age groups, your operating cost is going to decrease as you continue to go through this. Obviously, when your child staff ratios continue to get larger, your payroll costs are going to go down, but your tuition also is probably going down as well. But you will start seeing some positive numbers, usually around the 2-year-old classroom, sometimes the 3-year-old classroom. You'll start seeing some positive numbers, and that's where your profitable children are. All right. This way, again, you'll kind of figure out your cost of care for the entire school, and it will help you decide where to put your main focus on marketing efforts and where you want to build your enrollment, also where you may want to cut some programs. All right. Now I've got a couple of other things I want to say about this topic. So I'm going to open the microphones back up. Any questions over anything that we've gone over? Any questions on the math? Pretty simple, huh? All right. It is pretty simple. It's just going to be time consuming is what you're going to find right here. Now, if you really want to get crazy with this, and I'm kind of a numbers person. I like to crunch numbers and pull up statistics and all this kind of stuff. That's how I entertain myself at night. Do this activity and figure out for the life of the child, for the time you have them in your infant room through the time they graduate out of your program, whether in the pre-K room or in a school-age program, figure out how much the cost of care is for that child as they progress through your program, and how much money you either pay or make through the time that the child spends with you. That's a huge eye-opener right there, because remember, you're losing money. In this case, you're losing money in your infant, probably toddler room. You're starting to break even around your 2-year-old room. You don't start making a profit till your 3 or 4-year-old room. And you're probably going to find that the entire 5 years that you had this kid, you didn't make a dime off of them. You know, it's still cool to have the child throughout the entire program, but it's pretty scary to look at it that way. Now you might be thinking, well, if I'm not making a dime off of this kid, from the whole 5 years that they're with us, how are we making any money? Well, you got to look at, you got 8 infants in your infant room compared to, 18 children in a 4-year-old room. Obviously, your age groups are going to increase in size over the years. You're going to have more children in those profitable classrooms. That's how it all works out right there. All right. Let's talk for just a quick moment about, I'll go ahead and, unless y'all need to take my screen down so we can just go back here. I want to talk real quick about school age programs. All right. There's kind of a misconception out there that you make a lot of money doing school age care. Because you only have the children for approximately 3.5 hours. Your child staff ratio is higher than any other age group, and a lot of people tend to believe that this is a very money-making program. Make sure that you do your cost of care analysis on these kids, because you might be surprised. All right, now. Is there a way to make good money in after-school programs? Absolutely there is. It could be your biggest moneymaker. It can also be your biggest loss, all right? What's going to be the difference and what's going to, make the ball go the either way? Do you own your vehicles, all right? If you outright own your vehicles and you are not making monthly payments on a vehicle, then yes, your school age program can be quite profitable. If you are leasing or making payments on vehicles that you're transporting these children in, you're probably going to be in the hole, all right? Or your profit is going to be very small on these kids. This right here may encourage you to work closer with your independent school districts on them busing the children to you if possible, okay? If possible. A lot of times people avoid that busing situation. It is a headache. They're trying to work with the ISD can be a pain sometimes. People say, well, I've got 3 buses sitting in my parking lot. We'll just transport them ourselves. When you start adding this up, you're going to see that you might want to have that conversation between the cost of the vehicles, the insurance on the vehicles, and you've got to remember you usually have additional payroll costs with additional drivers, okay, during those drop-off and pickup times. So you're going to do a little bit extra work with your school-age kids that you don't do with the rest of the kids when figuring your cost of care. All right? I also, kind of wanted to throw out there, I don't know how many of y'all use an accounting system such as ProCare, Child Care Manager, OnCare. There's so many different child care software programs out there. You get to find, whichever one best fits your program's needs. We use ProCare in my world. But, to make this really easy too, there's tons of reports that you can run in ProCare. For example, just this morning preparing for the webinar, I ran a specific charge credit summary for each age group that gave me an exact dollar amount of the tuition that was collected for each classroom. And again, you can run these reports in ProCare. It's pretty simple. I'm sure that Child Care Manager and OnCare and all these other things do the exact same thing, but some helpful tools to help you figure that out. All right. The other cool thing about this, I can tell you, just me myself, after I learned how to do cost of care analysis and how to figure my cost of care, it changed the way I do my accounting as well. especially when I start figuring my operating cost, I learn to be a little bit more specific in how I allocate that money and where I allocate that money and how I keep track of it. So it was a pretty big eye opener for me right there. Um, you're going to want to see typically when you start determining how do I charge my tuition rates. Um, in an ideal world, you would like to have at least a $5 per child per day profit on those kids. And so when you do start figuring what is your operating cost, I'll kind of go back to, let me go back to the screen right here. When I kind of go back to right here, what is my actual operating cost, that $41.63. You take that $41.63 and divide it by 5. That's $208.25 is what you're spending on that child each week. Ideally, you want to see a $5 per child per day profit on these kids. So if I was trying to determine how much tuition I would charge my parents in this classroom, I would take that $41.63 times 5 plus $5 a day, which would be a plus $25. So ideally, I would want to charge $233.15 to care for this infant. That'll give me a $25 per week profit on the child. You know, and that's where, again, you want to use that to determine your tuition cost. All right. So just a little bit of some helpful information right there. All right. Very cool. Y'all are being so surprisingly quiet during this webinar. Usually when I teach this in a classroom setting, it's total chaos out there. Usually people have boxes of Kleenexes because they're crying. I usually lose half of the class to the bar. You know, husbands start filing for divorces with their wife after they realize how much money they're losing. All kinds of crazy stories whenever you do cost of care. So awesome. All right, any other questions that y'all have, or any questions that you have? Was this helpful to you? Okay, you can either say it out loud or you can type it in. All right, was the cost of care analysis helpful? Yes. Okay, we're getting a lot of yeses out there. Okay, I knew that this was not going to take the entire hour because I wanted to allocate time for you to kind of start working with your own numbers. I just wanted to go through the instructions. Feel free to call me or email me if you've got any questions on how to do this, or if you run into a roadblock. Of course, the first thing you're going to want to do is get a hold of your financial statements because you're going to need those operating costs. So, you know, you definitely want to do that. But I encourage y'all to do this. It's going to be a big eye-opener for you. All right? Fantastic. You know what, everyone? Yes, Lisa Brooks, Jumdom, do you have a sample sheet on how to do this? Yes. If you go to the material page, I'm glad you asked that because I know several people jumped in late. If you go to the material tab on your control panel, you can download the instructions and also a sample that I put up there. If you don't have access to the material icon, shoot me an email and I'll send them to you. But, you know, I tried to write out some pretty detailed instructions on how to do this. All right. So it's January 12th. It's been a wonderful winter break from training and everything. We usually take, you know, from mid-November to mid-January off for the holidays. Plus, none of y'all like to come to training during November and December. But I'm excited that next week we start it all up again. So I'll be in Houston next week teaching Director Credential course. And then we kick off our 2017 weekend mini conferences next weekend in Houston, and we go until May. So busy season is here. I'm excited to see everybody. We've got incredible topics for our weekend mini conference. I'm super excited to get those going. Lots of new information in the Director Credential class. So we've got a lot of things that have happened to our industry, and so lots of changes. And of course, our training cruises. We have 2 training cruises coming up, February and April. Yes, I can still book you on those 2 training cruises, and we would love to have you. Several of y'all that are on this webinar have already been on a cruise, and so hope to see you again soon. All right, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining me today. Start crunching those numbers, get those calculators and pencils out, and I hope that you find this to be very helpful in operating a successful and quality program for your children. All right, thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.